Hi, everyone, and welcome to our series of interviews for Open Conference. My name is Matina Tsavli. I'm in the organizing committee of Open Conference, and today I have the pleasure to have with me Sander Hoogendoorn. Am I pronouncing it correctly? I'm so sorry.
No, I'm fine with it. It's different in any language, right? People with different backgrounds pronounce it differently. In Dutch, where I'm from, it's pronounced Hoogendoorn, but nobody can do that anyway, so that's fine.
Okay, so welcome, Sander.
Thank you.
Sander will be our keynote speaker for the upcoming Open Conference taking place on 22 and 23 of November 2024 in Greece, Athens. Welcome, Sander. We're so proud and delighted that we have you as a keynote speaker. You know, our audience would like to know you a bit better, so I'd like to start with some questions about you. Can you tell us a bit about your background and how you became interested in software development?
Oh, that's a long time ago. I actually when I was I think about 10 years old, so that's a very long time ago. That was 1977. My dad bought a programmable pocket calculator. My dad was a mathematician and a civil engineer, and he bought this thing, and I looked at it, and I started to write very simple code, which is sort of like BASIC with a lot of go-tos in it, and you could programming it. And a few years after, I got a Commodore 64. So that was my real first experience as a programmer. By the way, I still own it. It still works. It's a great machine actually. And so I started gaining interest in writing code. And then, of course, I went to university. I started computer science, and I've been a programmer ever since, basically. So I've been writing code since 1978. I officially make money with writing code since 1987. So that is like 37 years ago. And I still write code every day. Actually, right before we got into this call, I almost was late in the call because I was deep inside of my code that I was writing today. I'll probably continue after this interview again. It's, it's nothing I can help. There's code running through my brain all the time, basically. So it's not so much a profession for me. It's like a
Hobby.
calling, maybe. It's more than a hobby. It's like a calling. I have to do this stuff
A
actually.
calling. Okay, okay. So you have almost 37 years you mentioned of experience.
Yeah, paid
Okay.
experience, right? So in total, I've been writing code for about 46, 47 years.
Ah, okay. So what were some key lessons that you learned early in your career?
Oh, that early in my career. So after so I always worked during my studies, but after that, I went into a consultancy and I worked for a consultancy as a programmer for about 20 years in different consultancies. And the most important thing, I guess you'll learn that software development is not something that is very highly, well, let's say, plannable. And the reason for that is that it's very unpredictable. So most of the stuff that we do as developers is not something we've done before, because otherwise we could just copy it from something else or some AI generated, and that's not the case, right? We have to solve problems, and problems are hard by nature, and they require new ways of thinking, which means for all this 47 years that I've been doing this stuff, I've been trying to figure out how to solve problems. And because that's always new, it's very hard to plan it. So my first mentor, he always said, well, it's a bit like when you walk into the desert, and there could be and there's the thick fog, so you don't see anything. It's foggy and there's only gray, and it could be that there's a wall in the desert, so you might run into it or you might not. Depends on where you are, of course, but you don't know.
Well,
So
you mentioned that it's unpredictable, but in
yes.
what way? Because I mean, of course, you should tailor the software to the customers, to the clients' requests, but the technology also advances, so you have new stuff to learn. Isn't there a common ground? The programming skill, I guess, it's a common ground that you keep during the years.
Well, yes and no. Yes, you get better at it, but as you said, technology advances and technology changes, and there's new stuff coming in all the time. It's not like So there's parts of this industry that have been the same for the last 40 years, right? If you write COBOL, you write it in more or less the same way that you did 25 years or 30 years ago. However, if you have to stick up with the newest technologies because it's required by the solutions you're building, you have to look into new stuff all the time, and that keeps you sharp. It also makes that you quite often don't really know how to solve the actual functional or technical problem, and as a result, it becomes unpredictable, right? So
Mhm.
you never know exactly how long stuff will take.
Mhm.
That makes this a really complex industry. And the amount of knowledge that you need to build software is only growing, actually. So there's so much stuff that people on my team know that I don't know, and in reverse. So we all know part of it, but nobody knows the whole story, right? So that means
Yes.
we're always depending on the other people in the team. So
Right.
the smallest unit of ownership of code should be the team and not the individual. And yeah,
Right.
makes it a really complex. But it's really hard to explain that to people who've never written code or who don't do this as a profession. That it's hard to estimate. If you talk to managers, they're usually saying so. So first of all, they might say, "How hard can this be?" Well, you try it, then I usually say. But it's also hard for them to understand that I cannot estimate exactly how long stuff will take, because we always run into stuff that we didn't know when we started solving something.
I totally understand what you say. I also work in a consulting firm, and it's actually this is the pain point to estimate the effort correctly.
Yeah,
Well, I have another question for you. You mentioned that during university you also worked part time or full time, but you consider yourself now a five niner. I read your personal page and you mentioned that. So how important is work life balance for you?
very important. It's so let me tell a short personal story. So I got a serious burnout in 2009 2010. I had a relationship that was going bad. We just bought a really big new house that needed to be built, and I was working in a global job at a consultancy, and I was doing way too much at the same time. So I burned out. And what I learned during that period is that um, there's always more that you might want to do or feel that you need to do than you have time for, right? It's the same with my team. So there's always more work than we could do. There's more ideas coming into the company than we can ever handle, right? As a consequence, you need to make priorities. So on a personal level, that means you have to figure out what is important to you, and that's different for everyone. For me, I realized that that was basically my kids growing up, my mom and dad deteriorating. My dad died in the meantime, but that was like 5 years ago. My relationship, and then it is actually I love to travel, and I love Athens, by the way. And I love to write code with my team. So those, and I have some friends, of course, but and my football team is part of it, and some other friends. But that's it. So I don't have the time to do other stuff. So I focus mainly on what I really, really value, and that is just a very limited set of things. And all the other stuff, I just don't do it. I don't have the time for that in my life, especially
Mhm.
when you get older. Right, I'm 57. A time you run out of time eventually. So that means if you don't focus on the stuff that you really want to do, you're spending your time wrong. So I don't have the time to sit in endless meetings, for instance. I don't like meetings. Usually they can be handled quite briefly in 5 minutes, but people just fill the time anyway. And I don't like that, actually. So I don't like to sort of waste my time on doing stuff like that. So I only go into meetings if I think my presence will be useful for me or for the other people in the meeting. Otherwise, I'll just decline. So I learned to live my life very differently after the burnout, which means that, well, it's focusing on what is important.
Mhm.
That is not necessarily something that has to do with writing code. For me, it is, but because I really I love doing it, and so for me, it's an important part of my life. But it doesn't have to be the case for everybody, right? So other people like other stuff or find other stuff important.
Right.
and that's good.
It's just what you said, to do prioritization in order to know what you want really to spend your time in. It's very difficult for me to do prioritization. I haven't managed to fulfill everything in the right time, but I'm trying hard. But I guess it needs a lot of time to focus on the things you love.
Well, yes, and but first of all, it needs that you figure out what is most important to you. So, and uh, we in this society we have a lot of pressure coming onto us from feeling that we need to do the stuff that the things that we do. A lot of the stuff that you do in your daily life actually is not really necessary, right? There's you can save time on a lot of stuff, meaning you can focus on the stuff that really matters.
Mhm.
But it starts with figuring out what that is.
I also read in your personal page that you say an idea a day keeps a doctor away.
Yeah.
Is it also something it's worth spending time on, I guess?
For me, it is. Yes. So yes. So there's if you have the space in your head, and again, the space in your head you can create by getting rid of all the fluff, and if you find space, then there's more space to think about stuff and to get new ideas or to do new stuff or to visit new places or all the stuff that um, makes you feel alive basically, and ideas are a big part of that. So especially when I write code, is I have these new ideas coming up all the time, and I'm in the lucky position that I can put them in the code that we are writing at my team, and so for me, yeah, it's really vital. It's a way to keep myself alive.
Mhm, mhm. Not only about the ideas and the innovation, but also the motivation and the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
The yes, the feeling to be motivated and continue to learning in these advances, in these technology advances. How do you keep up with the technology advancement?
It's a good question. It's mostly a matter of being interested in it.
Mhm.
It's easier to invest time in stuff if you're really interested in it. I really want to know. And to give you one example, I'm currently building a dynamic layout for our website and also for our app, basically, that allows the marketeers to build up the website in free format that they probably would want it in. And the funny thing is that every time I add something, I'm like, oh wait, I can also do this, and then I can also wait, what if we do that? And it shifts all the time, right? It's programming is a very I would say dynamic thing to do, and it's organic, so it grows and grows and grows, and that keeps me elevated and enthusiastic about the stuff that I'm doing.
Is this a personal project?
No. It's the company that I work for. iBOOD is an e-commerce company. We're not active in Greece, unfortunately, but we are in a number of European countries, and I'm their CTO, which means my team and I, we build everything that you see, and also a lot of stuff that you don't see. So we innovate there on a daily basis, right? It's like every day we put out new stuff, and together with the other teams in the company, we sort of reinvent ourselves continuously, and that's
Mhm.
a very interesting process.
Okay. So, what advice would you give to a young engineer that starts his career right now?
Okay, that is again a good question. Um, so one choice I had to make at some point in my life is that whether or not to remain a programmer. So you start as a programmer, and then I would simply, if you simplify it, there's two ways you can go, right? So you can get yourself promoted until you don't write code anymore, or you can stick to writing code for the rest of your life. That's basically the two paths you see. I just had a lunch meeting with a guy who I used to write code with, like that was probably 25 years ago, 20, no, somewhere between 20 20. We're on the same project, and he was a young programmer. I was a little bit older. So I met with him over lunch just 2 hours ago, and he's now the owner of a company, and it's a good company. They make money, and he's really happy with it. And he said, well, as a result, I stopped writing code about 6, 7 years ago.
Mhm.
And he said, I just don't have the time anymore for that. And that particular point is whether or not you want to remain a programmer or not is a choice that every programmer at some point has to make. And the nice thing is, both of the answers are good. It depends on what you want with your life at that point in time.
And on the company you work for, normally the companies
Well,
uh, take one way or another.
yes,
You can have a managerial position, a managerial role with no technical skills at all nowadays.
yeah,
I don't say it's right, but it's happening.
it's not right or wrong. It's just what it is, right? And you have to think, if you're a young programmer now, you don't have to think about it now, but you will reach that point in time where you're going to say, okay, this is where I'm going to leave the path of becoming a very good, a very senior programmer or software architect, which is similar, right? Or go into managing stuff. Both is a good choice. It depends on what you want at that point in your life.
Mhm.
So, as a young programmer, you don't have to realize that now, but most people will. Well, a lot of people will feel that they need to make a career, they need to have a career, and remaining a programmer for the rest of your life is not always considered a career, right? It's like, oh, you don't become an architect and you become a project manager, a manager, and whatever, right? So it's fine if you want to do that, but if you are a bit like me, like I want to write code every day or almost every day, that means I deliberately made a choice not to follow the other career path, even though I'm now the manager of my team. But yeah, but it's part of what I do. But I'm not a manager per se. But the other career path is fine as well. It's up to you. But don't feel pressured into going that career path if you rather want to be a programmer, because there's space for that. There's room for that.
Right, right. So I have a last question. I would like you to give us a teaser on your upcoming speech. It's entitled The Zen of Programming, and
Yeah.
I would like to know what inspired you to write it.
Yes. So I think it's a unique talk. It's a very personal talk. So at some point in time, I was asked to do. So this was in the middle of Corona times, and there were no conferences whatsoever, no conference with live audiences, right? And then one week in 2019, 2020, I don't remember the exact date there. There was one week that the lockdown was removed, and there was one conference in the Netherlands called JSpring. It's a Java conference that organized their conference right in that week, which was really weird that it was in the middle of lockdown, and we were allowed with 1,000 people in this room. And the organizer, they asked me, "Could you come and do a keynote?" And I was like, "Okay, this is a unique opportunity, right? Because this is right in the middle of COVID, so I need to do something that is uplifting." And I was like, what can I add to the talks in a conference that already has a lot of technical talks, a lot of talks about code and about frameworks and stuff coming up and infrastructure? And I'm like, well, probably because I've been a programmer for so long, I'm going to try to share stuff that I came across in these 47 years that made me change the way I write code. And this could be really tiny changes in how I did that like 40 years ago, which have a large effect on it later. And there's lots of those. So I started to gather moments throughout my life that made me change the way I write code into how I write code today. And probably if I would do the talk in 5 years' time, I would have other stuff in there as well. So it's a journey throughout my personal programming career with lots of code examples and lots of tiny things you could do with your code that makes you program differently. And
Mhm.
it's always, of course, personal. So it's a matter of not everybody has to do everything I do in the same way I do. Not at all. But to keep thinking about how you write your code and never stick with the status quo. So that's part of what I do. Right? I always change. So it's always getting better at stuff, and that doesn't mean precisely writing the code as it is. So I was doing an audit on a piece of Java code, a Spring Boot application, a couple of weeks ago, and I was looking into code, and the code was very similar from other pieces of code that I saw like 10 years ago. So apparently the way people write code in certain environments stays the same for a very long time, and that is on the one hand is good, but it also leaves out a lot of new things that you might learn, which makes you write better code. uh, and if you start ignoring that's well, that's not what I do, at least. So the talk is full of the changes I made to how I write code, coming from ideas that I picked up from various people and various, well, events or books or just people I work with, basically.
That sounds very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
So, Sander, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to come to our conference and be our keynote speaker. We're all inviting you to join us on 22 and 23 November 2024. It will be held in Athens, Greece, the ICE conference. You will find below some links to get your tickets and get information about the conference. Thank you all and see you again. Bye-bye.